Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 771. Xue Yan Wakes Up. But Venerable Mei didn't die? How could this be possible? Someone raised the question. You also believe this nonsense? It clearly is a lie Jun Moxie spun to stir public sentiments. Such a strong backlash, plus attacks that costed the lives of 3 saints, and the double wrath of the heavens and earth. How could she survive? Even the 3 saints from illusory blood sea had cushioned her back for her. If she didn't die, then there was really no justice. Obviously Jun Moxie only said it to pacify everyone. If she really didn't die, then why hasn't he brought her home? I'd suspect that this was said to trick those simple-minded Xian beasts. Someone else carefully rebutted this point in a sensical manner. Makes sense. Jun Moxie said that he had sent Mei Xue Yan to his master to recuperate. But now he has to spend such a long time to go and find his master. This clearly is a huge contradiction. Even the dumbest person can infer that Venerable Mei is definitely dead. Jun Moxie refused to admit it, probably because he was afraid that those Xian beasts would no longer listen to his commands due to Mei Xue Yan's death. So he came up with this bullshit. Yes. Since there is still some time before they return back to Tianxiang, let's take this opportunity to recuperate and wait for Jun Moxie and his master. Who'd expect Jun Moxie to be this familiar and tactful about the situation? Knowing that we are anxious from waiting, he went ahead and fulfilled all our wishes, inviting his master to court death. Ha ha ha. Not bad. Not bad. Truly. One will search high and low only to find it when one least expects to. Well said. Ha 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 ha. Just as Li Yuran had judged. These few saints and their capabilities were indisputably high. But their wisdom was also indisputably poor. To think of all the false setups as real happenings. But to interpret the only truth as something that was false and even come up with a logical reason for it. So overbearing. But this was also the brilliant part of this stratagem. Anyone else would think that Jun Moxie wanted to seek revenge. But since he wasn't strong enough, so how could he get his revenge? If he didn't look for his master, who else could he look for? So it made completely sense for Jun Moxie to seek his master. It was reasonable and suited the current situation. Aside from finding his master, there was no other way. Jun Moxie was destined to only have this path. When Li Yuran was considering this scheme, he not only thought of the reason, but rather also took into consideration of how every person in the 3 holy lands would think, making it more suited to human nature, fitting it to their tastes. It would really be weird if this stratagem did not work. Had it been Jun Moxie, perhaps even he would think the same way. And this was where the brilliance of this stratagem lied. The only loophole was that Li Yuran and the rest of the world were unaware that master of Jun Moxie was non-existent. Since no one knew of it, there was no concern. So this stratagem was essentially flawless. What needed to be done had been done, and the fake news had also been spread. Jun Moxie planned to resolve and sort out all the vengeance during this time. Tianxiang Emperor Yang Huayu. This fellow had been living comfortably long enough. It's a great time to finish him up. Letting him die in the hands of his son in the end. He probably will feel great. Inside the Hongjun Pagoda, Mei Xue Yan felt like she was floating amidst the clouds and mists. In front of her was a bright path that led to the endless horizons. There was a strange compelling force that attracted her to walk over to that path. She floated towards that direction against her will. But at this moment, an anguished, furious, but resolute voice shouted and resonated in her heart. If the heaven want you to go, then I shall defy the heavens. Just listening to this voice was enough to tell the sort of emotions the person who said it was experiencing. It was a sort of anguish, disappointment, and furiousness. The sort of hysteria where even the soul was sinisterly threatening the heavens. She couldn't help but stop. She wanted to turn around because she could recognize that this was the voice of her beloved person, but she couldn't turn her head. She mustered all of her strength to resist the temptation of walking toward that bright path. I don't want to go. I don't want to leave him. I want to live. I must live. Finally, she managed to turn her head around. Then, she felt an incredible pain all over her body and suddenly woke up. When she woke up, the first thing she did was to check her body. She woefully discovered that she was really done this time. Not only had her returned back to her original form, her current self was not even the lowest Xian beast. What more, a 4th level venerable? From a 4th level venerable to nothing at all, such a drastic drop in elevation almost made Mei Xue Yan break down. But in her heart, she did not have even the slightest feeling of regret. As long as he is fine, it's fine. I can still live. Watching from secretly from afar, even if I cannot see him. But he will still be my most beloved person in my heart. Mei Xue Yan was so deep in her thoughts that she suddenly realized in shock that she was no longer in that warm hug. Thinking was one matter, but realizing it was another. She couldn't help the sudden wave of disappointment that filled up her heart. Could it be he, after he realized my original form? He couldn't accept it and abandon me? When anyone realized the beautiful person they had pledged their undying love for had turned into a small ferret, they'd probably find it difficult to accept. Even if he abandoned me, it is what he should have done anyway. Even if he didn't abandon me, I will still need to leave. Just that, my beloved man. I hope that you can continue to live blissfully and spend this lifetime peacefully. She thought of this sorrowfully as she slowly opened her eyes. But she realized that she was in an extremely bizarre place. The heaven-earth spiritual chi in this place was so thick she felt like it was almost suffocating. What is this place? There is such a divine place that exists in the world. Mei Xue Yan opened her round and adorable eyes, raising her head to around, feeling the heaven-earth spiritual chi and life energy that gushed into her body like flowing waters. She felt like she was still dreaming. If I practice in this place, I will be able to recover rapidly, she thought happily. The pure spiritual chi coming from beneath her also gave her a great surprise. She suddenly realized that the giant rock she was resting upon as a bed gave off another type of heaven-earth spiritual chi. And it was of the same concentration. Far away was a large field of flowers and greenery swaying gently. No. They were definitely not ordinary plants. Mei Xue Yan, who had already seen countless aged and rare medicines back in Tianfa Forest, took a careful look before covering her mouth in shock. She could tell from one look that all these were rare medicinal herbs of tens of thousands of years. Every single one of them. How is this possible? Is that still ginseng? The one beside it, is that snow ginseng? But how could this ginseng be even bigger than a radish by so many times? Mei Xue Yan almost believed that she had already reached heaven. This place was the legendary immortal realm and definitely not the mortal realm. Because there was no such divine place in the mortal world. At this moment, there was a wave of odd movement in the air. She shrank and hid herself in fear. After all, she was still too weak and vulnerable right now. She curled herself up and closed her eyes, only leaving a small gap to take a small peek. A person appeared suddenly. It's him. Mei Xue Yan suddenly felt like crying. It's him. He didn't abandon me. This place must be a place he found for me to recuperate, but how can I face him when I'm like this? How do I face him? Xue Yan was overcome by a wave of panic and heartache. My sweetheart, how do I face you? And how do you face me? Xue Yan's entire heart was in turmoil. She shut her eyes and stayed still. I should just pretend to be unconscious, at least there won't be any awkwardness to face each other with a loss for words. Jun Moxie appeared in the space of the Hongjun Pagoda in a flash, silently watching Xue Yan, who was recovering. He reached out to check her breath, which it was light and slow, showing that she was still in deep sleep. Her condition did not worsen, and all the signs showed that Xue Yan was making a good recovery. He suddenly felt like his heart had calmed down out of the blue. All the evil tendencies he had earlier had vanished in an instant. Just looking at Xue Yan making a slow, but steady recovery, his heart was filled with serenity and tranquility. He had completely calmed down. Jun Moxie tilted his head and finally laughed in resignation. Xue Yan, you have really become my mood barometer now. Just now when I was outside, I wanted to slaughter the entire world, but coming in and see you instantly made my mood get better. He sighed, before bending down to gently pick Xue Yan up in his arms before slowly sitting down. Pressing his forehead against Xue Yan's small little skull, Jun Moxie whispered, Xue Yan, I may have promised you that I could wait for the opportunity and accumulate my strength before taking my revenge. But, this time, those 23 people from the 3 Holy Lands who had hurt you, I definitely will not let them off. Especially those 6 saints. I absolutely will not allow them to retreat as they wished, and also that young saint, Jun Xie, who came up with the plot of using Mother to threaten you. Huh. I will definitely make him regret coming into this world, this bastard. Xue Yan allowed herself to be carried by him, not moving. Jun Moxie was zoning out as he looked at the white mist in the Hongjun Pagoda, not noticing Xue Yan's ears gently twitching. He still cares about me so much. Even though I cannot return back to my human form and I've returned to my original form, but he still cares for me like this. Xue Yan was feeling extremely gratified and happy. Xue Yan, I really hope to see you get better soon and recover your human form quickly. Sigh. I am really stupid. It's been so long, but I never got around to doing that stuff with you, Jun Moxie said melancholically. I had planned to prepare to consummate our marriage when we had returned from this trip, but you got too reckless and made yourself like this. I'm really angry. Having nowhere to relieve myself is really miserable. When you recover, you'd better compensate and make it up to me properly. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 772. Xue Yan Recultivates. Unlocking Heaven's Fortune. Xue Yan felt embarrassed. To think that this scoundrel was harboring such horrid thoughts. Luckily, I've returned to my original form, or else, if I were in my human form, I probably wouldn't be able to resist his advances anyway. Now, let's see what you can do. Xue Yan thought bashfully and sweetly. Sigh. Men, we're really no good when it comes to this. Once we get excited, there's no way to suppress it, and we'll be burning with desire. Poor me has been holding back for a long time. I can't do this. I can't do that. Everywhere I go, I get rejected, or have people rolling their eyes at me. Finally, with great difficulty, I found one who doesn't reject. But in a blink of an eye, my great beauty became a small, little creature. Jun Moxie moaned and groaned regrettably. It really is difficult for me. I've been holding back. I could just die. At the same time, I hope that you return back to your human form. But I'll be a little unwilling as, after all, you are really extremely adorable in this tiny form. You are also to be blamed for this. You didn't make it clear. You didn't say earlier that you were that little beast in the Tianfa forest that I had taken advantage and behaved inappropriately to. It was so nice kneading and rubbing you. That feeling on my hand was really good. Enough to make one drunk. How I miss it. Jun Moxie continued to dwell in his melancholy, his big hands subconsciously stroking Mei Xue Yan's body. As expected, this scoundrel doesn't harbor any good thoughts. Mei Xue Yan thought embarrassedly. She genuinely wished that she could just viciously bite into that big, indecent palm. Really, without you beside me, I really am lonely. Jun Moxie suddenly sighed. And his palm also stopped moving. Actually, I am also not part of this world. The world I originally came from is too far away from here, leading a wandering existence in a different place all alone. That sort of feeling is truly unpleasant. After all, I am just a wandering soul from another world, and you, as a Xian beast who had cultivated a human form, looking up, this entire world is like a different place to you. The two of us have too many similarities. Mei Xue Yan couldn't help but jerk lightly. This sudden news was really too shocking. After all, I am just a wandering soul from another world. This sentence from Jun Moxie's mouth left Mei Xue Yan in completely shock. If she were able to speak, she may already have cried out in surprise. But this jerk of her body finally brought Jun Moxie back to his senses. Xue Yan, you've awakened. Are you better? Jun Moxie carried her up elatedly, making her face him. He opened his mouth and bit her small little mouth. Mei Xue Yan shut her eyes tightly, trembling all over. If you're awake, you're awake. Why are you still so shy? What sort of relationship do we have? We've done what lovers should have done. Wait. No. The most important deed has yet to be completed. Jun Moxie laughed happily. You don't know how worried I've been the past few days. God. You are my star. My moon. My sunshine. My life. The flowers in spring. The refreshingness of summer. The fruits in autumn. The warmth of winter. Ah! Jun Moxie was so mushy that even Mei Xue Yan, who was in her original form of a Xian beast, couldn't help but feel goosebumps. Her entire skin turned red, not from bashfulness or embarrassment, but a mix. Too terrifying. Why are you shivering? Hurry up, open your eyes and look at me. Jun Moxie threatened. Or not. I'll hit your small b** talk. After making this statement, he suddenly felt exuberant. Since the two of them knew each other, when had young Master Jun felt this sort of exuberance before Mei Xue Yan? Now he really found it invigorating. Finally, I'll get my revenge for all that wrong suffering. Little girl, you've fallen into my hands this time. Frequently abusing me last time. Young Master Jun laughed in an unbridled manner, a joyous expression on his face. He smirked villainously and lasciviously. Mei Xue Yan opened her mouth, but shut it, and shut her eyes while she was at it too, completely ignoring this fellow. Go on. Scream. Why aren't you screaming? I'll be honest with you. Even if you scream until your throat tears, no one will come and save you. You still dare to be uncooperative with me? Did you think that I couldn't do anything just because you shut your mouth and closed your eyes? Watch me hit your small b** talk. That feeling is really excellent. Young Master Jun haughtily threatened, dirtily. Mei Xue Yan was scared by him. She was really scared that this scoundrel would really humiliate her little part, opening her eyes instantly. Although she couldn't speak, she glared at him furiously. Aside from embarrassment, there was also anger in her eyes. Hee hee. I mean to say that that part of you is extremely pretty. Noticing that she was really enraged, young Master Jun quickly attempted to appease her. Your eyes are beautiful. And so are your brows and your mouth. You look good from head to toe. No matter how I look, I can't get enough of it. Hee hey. Mei Xue Yan was angry, but she also felt like laughing. God, how did I meet a clown like this? This fellow is too ridiculous. Most Xian beasts are unable to understand what humans were saying, and after falling down so many levels, it seems like I am nothing, not even the lowest level Xian beast. But why is it that I can still understand what is he saying? How good it would be if I couldn't understand a single thing. At least I would be spared from the anger and sappiness. But she could deny that after being distracted by Jun Moxie like this, the shame and distress of facing Jun Moxie in this original form had decreased a lot. A sappy experience like this wasn't a bad feeling. Xue Yan, don't you dare think groundlessly. I like you no matter how you look. Jun Moxie saw that she had finally relieved her mind of those thoughts and was also relieved. Seriously, he said, you will forever be the Xue Yan in my heart. You need to believe yourself. And even more so, believe in me. Mei Xue Yan lifted her small head and looked at him bravely for the first time. She was spellbound, and only after a while did she nod her head gently. The look in her eyes was full of trust and reliance. Although no words were exchanged, all her emotions and feelings were conveyed. Such a good girl. Jun Moxie praised. Did you know? Xue Yan, this place is the inside of my body. In other words, the two of us are one right now. Mei Xue Yan looked at him in surprise. The inside of your body? Such a big space like this. How could it be inside your body? This is too incomprehensible. But he wouldn't possibly make up such lies to deceive me, right? Jun Moxie smiled and carried her in his arms. Then he continued to explain in a gentle voice, telling her all about his previous life. How he roamed the world all alone, single-handedly. How he quickly determined enmity and look upon the pugilistic world with cold eyes. How he finally transmigrated and came into this foreign world. Mei Xue Yan's eyes widened bigger and bigger as she listened. An incomprehensible matter like this. Even with all her wide and vast knowledge, she had never heard of such legends before. Looking at her small, petite form with widened eyes, Mei Xue Yan was completely captivated by his story. Jun Moxie couldn't help but laugh, gently poking her small little nose. There are unimaginable things in this world, but never things that cannot happen. What is so surprising about this? Actually, even the founding ancestor of the so-called Xian skills in this world, the Nine Nether First Young Master, is not from this world. But he comes from a different place from me. To make a real comparison, I'm a lot more proper. That person is a thorough and complete nutcase and lunatic. At the same time Jun Moxie alleviated himself, he also ruthlessly degraded the Nine Nether First Young Master. Mei Xue Yan rolled her eyes at him harshly. If she were still in her human form, it would be extremely charming, but since she was currently in her original form, she just looked extremely adorable. Upon seeing it, Jun Moxie laughed loudly, overcome by an unexplainable happiness. Xue Yan, I have already thoroughly recast a set of meridians for you. Don't talk now. It seems like even if you wished to, you couldn't, follow the way I circulate the Xian Qi. And remember this path as it circulates. Jun Moxie smiled and said, "From now on, you shall cultivate my martial arts." Mei Xue Yan only felt an oddly refreshing and soft, yet tenacious qi entering her body, flowing through a meridian path that had never existed before. She instantly felt better. After Jun Moxie retracted his hand, she began to practice circulating within this set of new meridians on her own. She could hear Jun Moxie's voice beside her ear. "Remember, this is the directive of the first level. Illumination is spread when the divine light is set into movement. Tread upon the spring of immortals to transcend the 9 heavens. The heart becomes a mountain of treasure when the world is within grasp. A soul that undergoes 9 divine refinements may never fall to hell." Mei Xue Yan committed it to her memory, entering a state of deep meditation. She excitedly realized that this set of skills was so much stronger than the original skills she had been practicing. She had only completed 10 circulations, but there was already significant changes within her body. And furthermore, she had a peculiar feeling as if she was about to make an advancement any moment. Jun Moxie watched as Mei Xue Yan slowly stabilized. He couldn't help but feel envious, commenting, "You are really fortunate. Back when I just started practicing, I knew nothing of what generic paths to use. Even trying to enter a state of deep meditation was as difficult as trying to reach the heavens. Now, good for you. I already casted your meridians to perfectly skip all the beginner work. People are truly different. As expected, beautiful ladies have it better." After sighing and praising himself, he focused on providing protection. After all, this was the first time Mei Xue Yan used this set of skills. Furthermore, with a completely new set of meridians, if any mishaps occurred, Jun Moxie really would not know where to cry. It wasn't long before a small hurricane of spiritual qi appeared before Mei Xue Yan's head. She attracted all the purest and concentrated heaven-earth spiritual qi in the Hongjun Pagoda over to her tiny body. Jun Moxie clicked his tongue. As expected of a 4th-level venerable recultivating, "Look at you. So fast. Why am I feeling so inferior?" After a long time, Mei Xue Yan's breathing began to get heavier and faster, her skin flushing a gorgeous shade of pink. Jun Moxie didn't even dare to look at her. This was a crucial moment. As long as this foundation level was successfully broken through, then she would enter the 1st level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. And it would be more smooth after this. If she didn't break through the first time, trying to make an advancement the next time would be even more difficult. Undoubtedly, it was a painful period. But Mei Xue Yan bore with it with all her strength. She knew that her most beloved person was watching from beside her, so her heart was stabilized and blissful. She used all her strength to break through. "Moxie, I will not let you be disappointed. I definitely won't." Mei Xue Yan exerted her mental strength, constantly pushing her way through. Finally, with a series of sound of cracking bones, a dirty, black substance oozed out of every single pore on Mei Xue Yan's petite body. And her cultivation level successfully advanced in this moment, leaping straight to a level 2 Xian beast. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 773. You practice while I go kill people. With a jerk of her body, Mei Xue Yan opened her eyes in disbelief, checking herself out. Breakthrough? So easily? Xue Yan, you are really great. A natural talent. Jun Moxie was full of praise. At the same time, he quickly activated the power of water, causing the spiritual qi in the surrounding air to turn into water droplets that fell into the huge basin he had already prepared. To turn spiritual qi into water for bathing. Xue Yan could feel the pinch from merely watching such wasteful extravagance. If she drank that water, who knew how much her strength would grow? Jun Moxie scooped her small body up and put it into the basin without giving her a chance to argue and started to bathe her personally. Xue Yan felt extremely ashamed, struggling with all her might, wanting to bathe on her own. But she was heartlessly rejected by Jun Moxie. Can you wash yourself like this? This is stuff that is stuck to your body. You don't be able to shake it off. Be good. Or else I'm going to start playing rogue. Xue Yan felt helpless. You behaving like this doesn't count as playing rogue? But she understood that Jun Moxie was speaking the truth. With her current form, she was indeed unable to wash herself clean, unless she waited for the dirt to dry and fall off on its own. But as someone who liked keeping things clean, she wouldn't allow it. Honestly, had young Master Jun not taken the initiative, she would probably have begged him to help. Then it would be even more embarrassing. So although she was extremely embarrassed by Jun Moxie's tyranny, she only allowed him to do as he wished. After all, there was a hint of thoughtfulness amidst all that tyrannical behavior. She comforted herself in her mind, luckily. I'm not in my human form. Otherwise, I'd really die from embarrassment. It was the first time she felt fortunate that she was not in her human form. Jun Moxie thoroughly washed every single part of her body. But he was afraid that Xue Yan would be distressed over this and ignore him, so he tried to put on as decent an expression as possible. But in his heart, he was lecherously imagining that he was bathing Xue Yan in her human form. Upon going down this trail of thoughts, his little actions naturally began to get more indecent, and a certain body part of his also unconsciously began to raise itself. After a long time, the washing was finally completed. Jun Moxie panted heavily. Xue Yan was also panting heavily, and both of them clearly a little exhausted. Just that Xue Yan was panting from tiredness, while Jun Moxie had fantasized so much to the point he couldn't take it anymore. To be able to fantasize to the point his entire body was burning with desire. As expected, young Master Jun was an incredible person. However, it was not Jun Moxie's intentions to be wasteful by using spiritual qi in the form of liquid to bathe Xue Yan. Xue Yan just had her meridians recasted, and it was also the first time she was using the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Her meridians seemed to still be very fragile, unlike her peak Xian beast body in the past. By using this pure heaven-earth spiritual qi to bath, it allowed the purest spiritual qi to permeate through her skin and enter her body, bit by bit. At the same time Xue Yan absorbed it, it formed a natural, protective layer over the skin on her body. With this protective layer, Xue Yan had essentially blended into the heaven-earth spiritual qi within the Hongjun Pagoda. Absorbing the spiritual qi would be a simple task which would proceed smoothly and more easily, with increased effectiveness. After the washing was complete, Jun Moxie activated the power of fire to heat up the surrounding air. Within seconds, Xue Yan's wet fur was completely dry. Young Master Jun had originally wanted to use his hand as an iron to dry her fur off. But it was really too extreme. If he continued to have such intimate contact, he would probably explode. And that wouldn't look good. So he decided to take the hard way out, resolving the matter in a more roundabout way. The power of fire was so convenient. Drying was only a matter of seconds. Jun Moxie had just finished when he suddenly hit his own head. Regrettably, he said, "Why am I so stupid? Even if I don't do it myself, watching you shake your bum to shake the water off would also be great." Shake my bum to shake the water off. Xue Yan was finally enraged. She bit down harshly on his shoulder. But just as her teeth grazed his flesh, she couldn't bear to go through with it. "My teeth now are really sharp. What if I hurt him when I bite down? My heart would hurt if he is in pain." And thus, she took a gentle bite experimentally. But Jun Moxie groaned in pain dramatically, before bursting into loud laughter. The two of them fooled around for a while before Jun Moxie stood up. "Xue Yan, you focus on practicing in here. I need to go and see to some matters. Sigh. Your progress seems to be a little too slow. You are now only a second tier. Then wouldn't you take your entire life to cultivate it all back?" Xue Yan glared at him angrily. "This is slow. Then what is considered fast? I barely practiced for an hour and I've already risen to a level 2. This is already tremendous speed." Jun Moxie laughed. "You really can't be not convinced. Look at your husband. Me. I'm a living example. I spent less than a year. No. To be even more exact and specific, I had used only 10 months. From a third-rank Sky Xian, to a Silver Xian, Golden Xian, Jade Xian, Earth Xian, Sky Xian, Spirit Xian, to Supreme. And now, I am a solid level 2 Venerable. You think it is very incredible to attain second tier after practicing for only a while? Let me tell you, you are still far from grasping the good thing about this set of skills. The real benefits is still in the back. Furthermore, you are practicing in here now, with no other matters to see to. And the heaven-earth spiritual chi in here is so dense and rich, all at your dispense. The conditions are so much better than what I had when I started back then. I believe that it is not impossible for you to reach your original 4th level venerable peak within a year, perhaps even breaking through to become a saint." Xue Yan's eyes glowed as she listened to him. She had already noticed the marvelous aspect of this set of skills just now. It was truly wondrous. But now, listening to what Jun Moxie had just said, she instantly felt that her advancement speed was a little slow. She even knew that whatever Jun Moxie said was the truth. Because she had witnessed Jun Moxie's growth in his strength. From the first meeting, Jun Moxie was only at the peak of a Jade Xian, but today, he was already a solid second-level venerable. How many levels did he bypass during this period of time? And it was all within the duration of half a year. And there were so many matters that he needed to see to personally in between. Jun Moxie's words greatly raised her confidence in recovering her original strength. The same set of skills, and the environment I am practicing in is better than Jun Moxie's before in all ways. If Jun Moxie could do it, why can't I do it? Xue Yan was instantly filled with confidence. Not only did she want to recover to her original prowess, she wanted to surpass it and attain an even higher realm. She had previously obtained victory over those saints with the aid of the Saint King Pill, but next time, she wanted to win with her own capabilities. But Jun Moxie's next sentence revealed his real intentions. "You must get better quickly, so I can consummate with you earlier. I've been waiting for such a long time for the day. Even if I can wait, Moxie Jr. is itching to get on with it. You didn't know how I was earlier." Xue Yan was instantly angered. She glared at him and waved her little claws dismissively. "Hurry up and get lost. Don't ruin this lady's good mood. This lady doesn't care if you really cannot wait." Jun Moxie laughed loudly and said, "You just rest assured and focus on practicing. I'll go and find those 6 wretched saints. Bloody hell. They dare to hurt my precious little Xue Yan. They must be sick of living. This matter doesn't end until I make them pay a price." Xue Yan was taken aback. She quickly grabbed onto him, worry evident in her eyes. "Rest assured. Good little Xue. I know that I am no match for them right now." Jun Moxie chuckled and comforted. "Who said that I was going to fight them? Your husband is not an impetuous person." Xue Yan looked at him in confusion. "How do you get revenge if you don't fight? Were you hoping to curse them to death with words? This young master is going to smash them with gold. If that doesn't work, then I will strangle them with the roots of trees. If that doesn't work, I will drown them with great waters. If that still doesn't work, then I shall burn them into ashes with fire. And if that fails, I will bury them alive with a landslide." Thinking of all the marvelous abilities of Jun Moxie, Xue Yan instantly felt reassured and let go reluctantly. Jun Moxie chuckled. In a flash, he suddenly groped her little B*TT, kneaded it, and hid it, grinning lasciviously. "This feeling. I really can't get over it." Then, he disappeared in a flash. Xue Yan jumped up in anger, wanting to teach him a lesson, only to find that he was already gone. She kicked angrily at the ground for a long time. After a long time, she looked in the direction Jun Moxie had disappeared to silently. "Moxie. Thank you. From now on, I will definitely stop allowing my imagination to run wild." Then, she returned to the position Jun Moxie had set her down at. She closed her eyes and focused on practicing. She firmly believed that the place Jun Moxie had provided for her to practice in was definitely be the best. So she firmly believed in this position. There was not even a bit of error in her confidence in Jun Moxie. This place not only had the heaven-earth spiritual chi of the Hongjun Pagoda, there was also the essence of life from the Tree of Life, and a heaven-earth spirit vein beneath. Slowly, a spiritual chi whirlpool began to form around her body. You truly would not be able to find a better place to practice in the entire world. Jun Moxie exited the Hongjun Pagoda, relieved. He originally wanted to go kill someone and get his revenge immediately, but was worried that after Xue Yan regained consciousness in the Hongjun Pagoda, she would be disappointed and sad if she didn't see him. As a result, he decided to wait for Xue Yan to wake up first, then explained everything in detail to thoroughly undo the knot in Xue Yan's heart before leaving with a peace of mind. After joking and fooling around, then using his own experiences to boost Xue Yan's confidence, he could finally heave a sigh of relief. He was a little mentally exhausted by the time he had exited. This was a battle with himself. For Xue Yan's sake, he must fight. And he must win himself. Facing a great beauty versus a small ferret the size of 2 palms, could the feeling be the same? Even though he clearly knew that the beautiful woman was the human form of this little ferret. But realistically speaking, no matter what, he would still feel a little uncomfortable. And what Jun Moxie feared the most was this highly possible discomfort appearing in his heart. How sensitive was Xue Yan? As long as Jun Moxie didn't control himself properly, she would immediately notice. Then even after she recovered, it would be a scar that would always exist in her heart. A scar that would be extremely difficult to get rid of. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 774. Old Place Encounter. For this reason, Jun Moxie had to keep up appearances the same way he had to with Mei Xue Yan in the past. And not only did he tell her about him, he also used the Nine Nether First Young Master as an example. The purpose of all this was to dispel all of the apprehensions in her heart. She had suffered a major setback very recently, and this was the time she was the most sensitive and vulnerable. What Jun Moxie wished to see was that originally confident and decisive Mei Xue Yan. He didn't want to leave any shadows in her heart. For this purpose, Jun Moxie truly went to great lengths. So Jun Moxie felt as if he had just fought a great battle with himself. A grand battle that he could not lose no matter what. With regards to his meticulous efforts, how could the clever Mei Xue Yan not understand them? Everything that Jun Moxie had done for her, the meaning behind each action, she understood them all clearly. Because of it, she thanked him from her heart. Yes, Mei Xue Yan was indeed wholeheartedly sincere to Jun Moxie. But was he not also treating her with all his heart and soul? Was he ever the slightest bit fake towards her? At this point, it didn't matter whether she was a Xian beast or a human, this life was not in vain. Mei Xue Yan was truly very contented now. Thus, she did not want to let Jun Moxie down. I, Mei Xue Yan, will triumph over myself. Return to the peak. I will not be unworthy of Moxie. Jun Moxie exited the city, utilized the yin-yang escape art and continued on with a speed akin to lightning. Moving at supersonic speed, he resembled a streak of formless lightning. He had to find the place where those bastards from the three holy lands were hiding. His hatred could not be set down. His anger could be swallowed. Without killing those people, Jun Moxie will not relent. On a small mountain not far south of Tianxiang City, Chen Chong and a group of people were gathered inside. Speaking of this mountain, Jun Moxie also happened to be somewhat familiar with it. This was where he first led his men to rob the second prince of the Xian beast tendon crossbows. It was also here where he took care Li Yuran's senior brothers. Most notably, it was where the first fight with the Blood Sword Hall took place. Without them being the wiser, he'd claimed a small debt of blood here before. Because of his actions, this place, which had been flourishing with grass and life, had been turned into a clean patch of land. Even more coincidental, why, the secret cave that he'd made to hide his men at that time was the exact same place the people of the three holy lands were hiding in now. If young Master Jun came to know about this matter, he would surely turn speechless. Even if there were more coincidences in the world, they couldn't be as coincidental as this, right? However, such were the facts. The incredible coincidence had appeared. Speaking of coincidences, the spot that Chen Chong was sitting at happened to be exactly the same spot that Jun Moxie had been sitting on back then. Honestly, this could not really be considered a coincidence since although the cave was not very small, this spot was truly the most comfortable. Only at this spot could one lie down or sit comfortably. It was exceedingly convenient. As the leader of the group, where would Chen Chong sit if not there? Although this location was not considered far from Tianxiang City, it could not be said to be near either. There were roughly 200 li between here and the city. But with the speed of a saint, it was not a problem to traverse this distance dozens of times a day. At the same time, it was somewhat out of the way, guaranteeing that they would not be caught off guard by Jun Moxie's master if the latter suddenly turned up. Any news from Tianxiang City could also be obtained with ease. So no matter how one looked at it, this was a very suitable location to camp. Another point was that Jun Moxie had truly made this cave too convenient to use. And it was precisely because of this reason that they instantly chose it. Otherwise, Wouldn't it be simple for saint-level experts to make a cave in any random mountain? Inside the cave, there were a few additional holes branching out from the side. These were obviously newly made the private resting area of the saints. On the side was a slightly larger space. 6 people were currently sitting inside one of the larger caves that had been recently dug out. There wasn't any anxiousness on their faces. Quite clearly, all of them were very capable of controlling their emotions. As for the other younger generation, they had all been dispersed to different areas to act as their ears and eyes. To these 6, even venerable level experts were considered as the younger generation. After a long time, the few of them finished adjusting their condition. Qi Tianfeng stood up and said, "It's this old man's turn to go out and look for some game. I'll bring a few jugs of vintage wine back on the way. Everyone is facing this vast stretch of mountains and snow all day long. How about we have a drink together?" Chen Chong nodded lightly and opened his eyes. A hint of a smile hung on his face as he said, "That's good too. Us old brothers only get to sit together like this every few hundred years. To be able to have a drink together is quite a rare thing." As for the 3 saint experts of the blood ocean, AI, perhaps their departed souls have not gone far and we can still a toast together. Also, we could count this as a final send-off for them. Life and death, what is the reason for all this pain? A sorrowful melancholy hung in the air as he said. Everyone opened their eyes and sighed collectively. At their level, their concern was no longer about which of the 3 Holy Land would be the leader, and which faction would claim power. Their sight had truly transcended beyond these mortal things. There were truly too few people in this world at their level. One dead was one less. Not to mention watching 3 die right in front of their eyes. Since it's like that, this old man shall make it a little more grand. Qi Tianfeng fell silent for a moment, a sense of loneliness appearing on his face as he continued. Once this matter is over, and the war for seizing the heavens has concluded, my guess is that us bunch of aged bones will most likely not have much chance to meet like this anymore in the future. Let's seek a bit of respite in the midst of the troubles. Looking at the situation now, Jun Moxie's mysterious master might not even reach here within the next half-month. Why don't we make the most of this period and drink to our heart's content without using our Xian cultivation to inhibit the alcohol? Good. Everyone agreed together. Just mentioning Jun Moxie's master had caused all of them to feel a heavy feeling in their hearts. If that person really came, everything would certainly be accompanied with thunderous wrath. In the life and death battle that would follow, who could tell how many of the 6 gathered here would be able to return? When they thought of this, the 6 of them began to treasure this moment as they sat together like this even more. At their age and cultivation, these people were already very open-minded towards their own life and death. But there was only one thing that they couldn't accept. It didn't matter if they died. But seeing their brothers die before their eyes would be a torment difficult for them to bear. Qi Tianfeng laughed somewhat bitterly and left. Behind him, a gracefully coquettish figure followed over. "Big brother Qi, wait for me. Let this little girl accompany you." The person who spoke was the yin-yang saint, Jiang Jun Xie. Jiang Jun Xie was the person most discriminated against by the group. Thus, he naturally felt extremely uncomfortable. Thus, no matter whose turn it was to go out to gather supplies, he would always insist on following along. This hole was simply too suffocating for him. The purpose of this shift work was mostly born out of this reason. Every day, one person would be sacrificed to bring this weirdo out for a walk. By doing so, the other 4 would feel much more quieter in the cave. Otherwise, with the status of these few seniors, how would they be willing to take on such shift work? Of course, It was more interesting for the person on duty. If that day happened to be when Jun Xie was in his male form, there would naturally be no issues. He basically would not say much and be mostly cold and emotionless. But whoever met the female Jun Xie would be the most unlucky person. Anyone would be brought to the edge of a mental collapse by his antics. The moment Qi Tianfeng heard the hair-raising voice, his heart instantly shivered and he sighed deeply. Without even turning around, he directly walked off. Listening to the sticky voice drifting into the distance and chasing after Qi Tianfeng, the other four in the cave could not help but to let out a breath of relief. That weirdo had finally left. They could finally relax now. In order to have as much peace as possible, everyone had decided that the person on shift should stay out for as long as they could. However, those who went out always returned very quickly. Spending time together with that weirdo was simply akin to torture. They would rather be dismembered by the rest. At least, that was better than being with him. Chen Chong sighed again and again, his face colorless and emotionless. After all, he was the one who'd brought this weirdo here in the first place. Outside, Jun Moxie had already finished searching the north, east, and west areas with a speed akin to chasing the wind. At this point, he had begun his search towards the south. Since these people had hardened their hearts to deal with him, they definitely would not have gone far. Thus, Jun Moxie had set his search radius to 500 li. Any further and it would be impossible. He'd already searched 500 li in those three directions, but he hadn't discovered anything. In that case, the final direction south was the focal point. The further south he went, Jun Moxie grew more and more certain that the three Holy Lands people must be in this direction. This was a kind of intuition, honed from his experience as the king of assassins. This intuition caused him to grow even more wary, to a point where he was careful of even searching with his spirit sense as to not rouse the attention of anyone. These were saint-level experts. The moment he was discovered, he would be done for. The purpose of his excursion was precisely to set traps for these people. But if he was discovered by the other party, he would instead fall into a trap himself. Wasting his efforts would be one thing, but his face would be thrown away. With Jun Moxie's startling speed, he only took an instant to cover over 100 li south. Just when he was about to use his spirit sense to search again, he suddenly felt a very hidden spirit fluctuation in front. Jun Moxie's heart thumped. They're here. Looks like this is really the place. He waited patiently and soon, two figures trotted out from the woods a distance away. The two looked no different from ordinary people. And there was nothing strange about their actions at all. Even if they came face to face, he would not be able to tell that these two were experts. Only, the two's speed was fast to an incredible extent. Just by looking at them, the two's steps looked no different from ordinary people. Their steps were not large and was very normal. However, their figures disappeared in an instant, only leaving behind their shadows, shortening the ground into an inch. And this was the peak level, shortening 1,000 li of ground. Jun Moxie's pupils shrank. The Saint Realm was truly extraordinary. Jun Moxie revolved his yin-yang escape and his body turned elusive as he soundlessly followed after the two. Although he'd already hidden his body in the void, he did not dare to get too close to them. Because the feeling that those two gave him was much stronger than even Mei Xue Yan back then. He had to be cautious. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 775. Assassinate. As he pricked his ears to listen, Jun Moxie found something surprising. Saints could also bicker with each other? This was a little too incomprehensible. Jun Xie. Since you've already come out, why aren't you going about your business? Why do you have to follow this old man around? Don't you find it annoying? Qi Tianfeng's head had swelled to the point of explosion from irritation. In that moment, he did not leave any face as he scolded. He was almost going crazy right now. So how could he care about being polite? They had only barely stepped out of the cave, and Jun Xie had already annoyed him half to death with his endless chattering all along the way. Qi Tianfeng had already used his spirit sense to cover his ears, but Jun Xie actually used a voice transference technique to continue talking to him, causing him to reach the end of his endurance. How could following Big Brother Qi be annoying? Oh, Big Brother Qi, you used the wrong words just now. You should be calling little sister Jun Xie instead. Jun Xie pouted shyly. Even though he was traveling at such high speeds, he still had the time to throw a flirtatious look and speak in a whiny voice. Big Brother Qi, if you continue to call me Jun Xie, this little girl is going to be sad. I feel so wronged. Jun Xie said depressedly. Qi Tianfeng stopped, his blood boiling with anger. Jun Moxie, who was hiding nearby, nearly spluttered with shock. A mouthful of bile surged through his throat, and he felt an intense urge to throw up. This is that yin-yang Saint Jun Xie. What a truly fecking spectacular fellow, as expected. He's someone that would cause others to want to retch every time they see him. Li Yuran's description had not been off even in the slightest. Abomination, this is too much of an abomination. AI. Qi Tianfeng raised his head to the heavens and sighed longly. A kind of pain worse than even death permeated his entire body. A saint expert who'd lived for so many centuries had already seen through life and death long ago. Death was but a small matter to them, so how could it be compared to this matter before his eyes? But how does that saying went? Although the toad that leaps onto one's foot will not bite, it will disgust. And this yin-yang saint, Jun Xie, was 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more disgusting than the most repulsive toad. After all, a toad would hop away as soon as there was a movement. If one truly could not bear its wretched appearance, they could even squish it to death with their foot. At the most, they would only have to endure the gross feeling a little longer. But this fellow beside him was not only more nasty than a toad, he was even more difficult to get rid of. It was impossible to run away from him, shake him off, or even beat him. After all, this was a saint on the same level as himself. Dear heavens, ah! Great earth, ah! Merciful Buddha, ah! Could someone please save me? Could you send down a bolt of lightning and strike this repulsive fellow dead? If that's impossible, it's fine to strike me to death too. This is truly too impossible to bear. Qi Tianfeng slowly sorted out his emotions and said in a cold and exasperated tone. Jun Xie. I still need to go and find some wine. If you have nothing to do, you can go elsewhere and play first, even if you want to take a trip to the brothels. There's no problem. I only beg that you don't follow this old man around anymore, okay? Ah. Big Brother Qi. You're not being respectful again. The brothel? What kind of place is that? That's a place for you men to go to. How could you ask this lady to go there? You're a lofty saint, how could you speak like that? This is an insult to this lady. I'll fight it out with you, boo-hoo. Jun Xie's bear-like hips swayed twice, and his eyes turned red in an instant, as if he had received some great insult. Jun Moxie, who was hovering nearby, could clearly see goosebumps rising on Qi Tianfeng's face. His lips were twitching, and his body trembled lightly. His eyes stared forward lifelessly, like a candle flickering in the wind, on the verge of being blown out at any moment. My dear ancestors, ah! Qi Tianfeng suddenly felt a hopelessness, as if the heavens and earth had closed their ears and eyes to him. Just what was this fellow intending to do by following him around? Didn't the other guys say that he would always go off on his own the moment he came out? Why was it that he was so unfortunate today? Kakik, Aya. I forgot. Tianxiang also has brothels that caters to the female crowd. The models there are also quite handsome, albeit not too robust. How did Big Brother Qi know this so well? Could it be that Big Brother Qi also likes this kind of thing? Jiang Junji asked in an odd voice. Qi Tianfeng very nearly suffered a complete breakdown. What did I say just now? What is this kind of thing? It was a wonder that he did not die of anger at that moment. To think that this she-male fellow thought of him as a pervert? I know that Big Brother Qi is concerned for me. Only, I don't really like twin-bladed swords, so I won't bother Big Brother Qi anymore. This lady will go and play elsewhere now. I'll meet you here in the afternoon. Okay? Then we can go back together. Don't worry, I will help you to keep your secret. Jiang Junji smiled mischievously, and with a sway of his hips, he turned around. All right, go then. I'll go too. Qi Tianfeng's entire back was drenched with sweat. The weirdo had messed with him so much to the point that he wished for death. He had completely missed the words about twin-bladed swords, secret, and so on. He only wanted to go as far away from that weirdo as possible. So the moment he heard that he was going to release him, he only nodded rapidly, turned, and fled as if he'd received amnesty. After seeing Qi Tianfeng disappear into the distance, Jiang Junji turned and went towards another direction. His hips sashayed widely with every step, and a light smile hung on his face as he muttered to himself. One really cannot judge a book by its cover. That old fellow Qi is actually such a perverted thing. In the future, there are a few things that should be discussed with him. I wonder how many handsome young men are waiting for this lady in this town. Jun Moxie felt all the hairs on his body stand up straight on their ends as he listened to these words. Just what is this person? Is that still a person? As he watched the stalwart figure sashaying away, Jun Moxie rolled his eyes and hurriedly chased over. Jiang Junji was neither slow nor fast as he traveled. A coy smile hung on his face, and half of his cheeks were flushed with pink. His eyes roved freely, seemingly shy, and seemingly hungry. It seemed like he was imagining some marvelous stuff in his mind. All of a sudden, his eyes lit up as an usually upright figure turned the corner. What a straight back view, lonely and graceful, like a lush green bamboo in the mountain. Jiang Junji thought. The reason he'd hung around those old codgers was because he lacked a better option. But now that such a pristine youth appeared, he immediately rushed up, wanting to grab him in his arms. It didn't matter if the kid refused. If soft methods wouldn't work, he would use the tough methods. After all, he could always force himself on him. Wow! That young lad's back view is truly enchanting. This lady can't take it anymore. Jiang Junji's eyes shone with excitement as he stuck his tongue out and licked his lips. With a flick of his hand, a small hand mirror appeared in his palm, and after hurriedly touching up his face, he looked at himself in the mirror a few more times before smiling with satisfaction. With a sway of his hips, he sprang forward like the spring wind, hurriedly chasing over. As expected, the moment he turned the corner, he saw a young man walking slowly at the front. With his eyesight, he could see in an instant that this lad was a completely normal person. How could an ordinary lad be able to escape the palms of a saint-level expert? This was a juicy feast walking before him. Jun Xie's drool was nearly rolling out of his mouth, but he still managed to call out in a shy voice. "Young master." The young master in front. His voice was soft and sweet, as enchanting as honey. Just by listening to this voice, others might really think that the one speaking was an exquisitely dainty and ravishingly beautiful young lady. The youth turned around in shock and immediately saw Jun Xie. His eyes widened and fear flashed across his pupils as he stuttered. Are you a human? Or a ghost?" "Ayaya, what words is this young master saying? How could there be ghosts on a bright sunny day? Even if there are ghosts, there's no need to be afraid. This lady has numerous methods to deal with them." Jun Xie licked his lips and smiled. Most of the lads who first saw him all reacted the same way, so he naturally did not feel anything strange about it. The more he evaluated this young lad, the more he found him delightful. His brows were straight and sharp like a sword. His nose was high and straight, and his lips were thin and supple. His hair was as black as ink, and his figure was tall and straight, with wide shoulders and narrow waists. This was the kind of man in many young girls' dreams. "Then you." The young man looked apprehensively at the strange creature before him as he edged backwards nervously. This was a heartfelt reaction, after all. This person was simply too repulsive. This lady has good intentions. Seeing that young master is walking so slowly. "Why don't I give you a hand?" Jun Xie felt more and more impatient the more he looked at this lad. His heart was skipping like a little deer at this moment. Such a handsome young lad. Today, he'd truly picked up a gem, Kakik. Needless to say, Jun Xie looked exactly like an oversized, perverted flower thief in the young man's terrified eyes. With a light leap, he grabbed him by the hips and dashed away rapidly like a bolt of lightning. Right now, finding a quiet spot and satisfying his desires was the most important matter. The youth under his arms screamed with fear. "Put me down. Hurry up and put me down. Help." Although he was screaming with all his might, his voice disappeared within the howling winds. Jun Xie felt even more excited, as he cackled evilly. "Scream. Go ahead and scream, my dear boy. Even if you ruptured your throat with screaming, it would still be useless." At this moment, a dense killing intent suddenly shone in the helpless young lad's eyes. Then suddenly, just as Jun Xie's mind was filled with wild fantasies and his heart was defenseless from being preoccupied with his excitement, a dazzlingly brilliant swordlight flashed, like the most radiant sun. The swordlight appeared right under Jun Xie's abdomen, plunging deeply into his body. With a pu sound, an exceedingly violent sword chi exploded in Jun Xie's body. An indifferent voice rang out. "Freak. Die." As this voice rang out, the young lad under his arms suddenly disappeared without a trace. When he reappeared again, he was already standing 10 zang in front of him, smiling lightly and staring at him with a wicked, vengeful glint in his eyes. This youth was naturally young Master Jun Moxie. Jun Xie howled with rage, his voice tragic to the extreme. Never had he ever thought that such a tantalizing prey would suddenly turn from such a harmless youth to a lethal killer. He hadn't expected that someone under the saint level would actually be capable of hiding his cultivation so perfectly before him. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 776. Pursuit. One had to know that even Qi Tianfeng, when facing Chen Chong, would be able to see through the latter's cultivation in an instant. No matter how the latter tried to hide his cultivation, it would be useless. But this random kid that he'd bumped into out of nowhere was not only successful in concealing his cultivation, was even successful in dealing him a fatal blow right when his guard was relaxed. Jun Xie was a saint-level expert, a peak-level character of this world. How quick was his reaction? The instant the sword stabbed into his body, he instantly sealed his meridians and forcefully hardened his flesh and muscles to a point where they were akin to steel. However, he was still a step too late. The sword chi had already entered his body and exploded. His body spiraled through the air, causing a shower of blood to rain down from the sky, before disappearing again. Then, he fell awkwardly to the ground. His eyes were wide open with shock and disbelief as he looked at the youth before him. The innocent light in that youth's eyes were slowly morphing, turning as vicious as a poisonous snake. He did not rush to counterattack immediately. Instead, he retreated instantly with a speed akin to lightning. This retreat directly created a 50 zhang distance between them. Then, he took out a greenish root-like object and stuffed it into his mouth. Thereafter, he chewed rapidly and swallowed. Then, with a flip of his hand, a 7-colored jade stone appeared in his palm. Grabbing the little jade stone, thick, white mist rose out of his body. At the same time, the little jade stone in his hand shrunk with visible speed, finally disappearing completely. Jun Moxie could not help but to cluck his tongue with disbelief. A Saint Realm expert was truly different from any other experts he had ever met. They were seriously difficult to deal with. Young Master Jun originally was quite confident since his sword had plunged into this perverted saint's heart. This was definitely without question. Coupled with that, the destructive sword chi had been released into his body, detonating. His internal organs must have suffered serious damage. Such grievous injury should have left him dead without a doubt. But this she-male thing had received such a great injury, but somehow only lost that little bit of blood. After that, just by chewing on a green root and using up a strange jade stone, he seemed to recover from the injury. How is that possible? This was simply too perverse. Mei Xue Yan had told him about a saint's powerful abilities and inconceivable recovery skills. And he'd also guessed that his second-level venerable cultivation would most likely not be able to hurt a saint expert at all in a direct confrontation. Even if it were a sneak attack, it would not necessarily be possible either. So-called sneak attacks were basically impossible against Saint Realm experts. Even if one was only an inch away, their reaction would be fast enough to block the attack. Even if he used blood of yellow flame and put all of his strength into one strike, it would not necessarily be enough to break a saint expert's defenses. If one wanted to deal with this class of experts, it had to be under a situation of complete surprise, when the former's defenses were completely down. Even if one managed to succeed in the attack, there must be an instantaneous burst of damage to follow up, claiming the saint's life in one strike. Otherwise, if the opponent was given even the slightest chance to retaliate, the one who died could be him. The difference between the two was simply too massive. Thus, the instant that Jun Moxie saw Jun Xie, he had already decided on a plan to deal with him. Executing the death blow at the closest distance. In other words, an assassination at zero range. This method was certainly effective, and it had been proven to be a success as well. However, the effect was not as good as he had expected. What he didn't know was that Jun Xie's heart right now was filled with terror to an extreme level. Jun Moxie's sudden stab was not only enough to be lethal. It was completely enough to vanquish his life and his soul. If this sword's target had not been him, Jun Xie, but another saint-level expert, it would have been fatal. Even if they received treatment immediately after being stabbed, they would still have to spend at least several years to dozens of years to fully recover from it. Such a heavy injury was something that even saint-level experts would not be capable of withstanding. However, he was Jun Xie, a person who had the bloodline of the strange races. Although Jun Xie was a half-bred bastard and was conjoined like them physically, he had still inherited the dirty characteristics of the strange races. That was, although he had only one body, there were two souls in his body. Thus, he had two sets of cultivatable veins. Furthermore, they would achieve a special yin-yang balancing effect which he could swap between freely at any time. Him spending one day cultivating was equal to two people cultivating for a day. Adding in the supplementary effect of his yin-yang balance, one day of cultivation could rival 3 days of cultivation for others of the same level. Putting it in another way, if he cultivated for 100 years, it would be the same as another saint cultivating for 300 years. That difference was truly massive. That was why he had been able to reach the saint realm in such a short time. And it was also because of this special characteristic that he was able to escape from Jun Moxie's blade, even managing to recover to a full state. However, Jun Moxie's attack was not completely without any use. In fact, it had done significant damage. This sword had utterly destroyed the male soul in his body. Today just so happened to be the day when his female self showed up. So although he looked fine on the surface, he knew that he would never be able to turn back into his male form anymore. More importantly, his special yin-yang balancing double cultivation ability was gone. This one sword had directly castrated him and chopped away one half of his body. How could he not be enraged? However, Jun Xie was not a fool. He had already sensed that all this had been an elaborate trap set just for him. After receiving such a heavy injury, Jun Xie did not think about seeking his vengeance. Instead, he was preparing to directly flee. As long as the green hills remained, there would never be a shortage of firewood. In case the other party still had some powerful traps waiting for him, he would truly be in danger. Perhaps even his female half would not be spared. But, just as Jun Xie was preparing to flee, the youth across from him revealed a strange expression upon seeing that he was fine. With a shriek, the latter turned and ran. That speed was incredibly quick, exceeding all expectations. This was no different from a panic-stricken stray dog or a fish escaping the net. In just the blink of an eye, he'd already escaped 100 zhang away. From the looks of it, this kid was about to disappear from Jun Xie's sight completely. He was successful in sneak attacking me, so why is he running? Seeing his opponent flee, Jun Xie instead suddenly lost his desire to flee as well. In that moment, he was grinding his brains painstakingly. What is going on? Could it be that kid is alone? The moment this thought popped up, Jun Xie's rage erupted. Just a mere junior? To think that he trapped me and caused me to fall into such a wretched state? Absolutely intolerable. When he looked again, that youngster had completely disappeared without a trace. Jun Xie howled with rage. Dang brat! You truly have the guts to dare to injure this lady. And you still want to run? This voice was no longer gentle. Instead, it was filled with frigid chill. Jun Xie snorted coldly, and his spirit sense surged out. In practically an instant, he had already locked down on the fleeing youth's escape path. In such a short time, the little bastard had actually escaped 40, 50 li away. He had dashed into a dense forest. If not for his spirit sense being vast and quick, he might have lost track of that sneaky brat. From the looks of it, this youth was truly fleeing with all his might. Judging by the power he'd shown in the previous strike, he had already reached the second level of the venerable REA. And in the mere blink of an eye, he'd escaped 40, 50 li away. It was obvious that even a second-level venerable would need to expend all their energy to reach such a speed. Furthermore, the kid had chosen to flee in the path of the more desolate areas filled with other wildlife like rabbits, chickens, and even wolf packs. He dashed into the wolf pack, startling them and causing them to run in all directions, creating an illusion that he'd run off in many different directions. Right now, the youth had already dove deep into the forest and was about to pass through it at any moment. Jun Xie roared with rage. "Little bastard, I'll see where you can run off to." His body moved, and with a schwa sound, he disappeared from the spot as he used his full strength and chased madly. The hatred in his heart grew denser and denser, to a point where it was becoming unquenchable. If the youth had not fled, and instead rushed forward for the kill, Jun Xie would have turned and ran instead. Although this kid's second-level venerable cultivation was not noteworthy in his eyes, Jun Xie would have suspected that there were further traps. Otherwise, how would the kid try to kill him there? He was a saint-level expert. But the moment he started fleeing, his greatest suspicion disappeared, and he disregarded everything to give chase. "Dang brat. So it turns out that you don't have a helper. What amazing guts ah. A mere second-level venerable actually wants to assassinate me." Jun Xie, a saint-level expert. Right now, Jun Xie was feeling like a fool who'd capsized a ship in a shallow ditch. The full speed of a saint could cover 1,000 li in a single breath. Just what kind of a terrifying speed was that? Jun Moxie had just dashed out from the forest and a figure flashed and appeared before him. A pair of eyes filled with killing intent was fixed on himself. "Feck. You crazy half-breed bastard. How could you be so fast?" Jun Moxie cursed with rage and turned around, dashing back into the forest again. Just the single insult of half-breed bastard was enough to anger Jun Xie till his eyes turned blue. Boiling with rage, he exploded. "Brat! You're still trying to run." Pushing out fiercely with his hands, a loud boom rang out as the trees before him were all blasted into the sky. Following that, Jun Xie dashed into the dust cloud. This strike was a truly indiscriminate attack. The attack range was several tens of zhang wide, and everything fell into its boundaries. This kind of terrifying power was definitely not something a second-level venerable could endure. Jun Xie was fully confident that his target had suffered heavy injuries from this attack. However, he was naturally unwilling to let his enemy die so easily. For such a despicable brat, Jun Xie was determined that he would at least torment him to a point where he begged for life and wouldn't attain it, and wished for death but could not die for 10 years before letting him die. Even doing that was still going too easy on him. Jun Xie passed through the dust cloud, smiling coldly as he looked up. About 30 zhang away, a youth's body was slumped against a tree, blood flowing freely from the corners of his mouth and his eyes listless. Quite clearly, the lad had suffered a grievous injury from this strike, and then ran out of energy, causing him to be slammed into the tree. Only now was his body sliding down. This point was easily ascertained just by looking at the deep indentation on the tree's trunk. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 777. Again. Still, Jun Xie, who had fallen into a great trap before, did not dare be careless in the slightest anymore. He stood 10 zhang away, observing him from a distance. Suddenly, he laughed coldly with hatred. Little bastard. Try running again. Why aren't you running anymore? Jun Moxie also saw Jun Xie at the same time. His face paled in an instant, and he struggled to escape. But the moment he moved, another large mouthful of blood flowed out of his mouth. Jun Xie snorted coldly and sneered in an effeminate voice, "Still want to move? Your 5 organs have already shifted from the impact. If you move again, you'll be dead for sure." At this time, he could confirm that the blood flowing from the boy's mouth was definitely internal blood. Whether it was the color or the thickness, there was no mistake. Furthermore, he had always been extremely confident in his own cultivation. His opponent was ultimately a mere second-level venerable. There was still the second-level venerable peak, third-level venerable primary level, third-level venerable middle level, third-level venerable peak, fourth-level venerable, fourth-level venerable middle level, fourth-level venerable peak, first-level saint, second-level saint stages between them. A total of 9 levels. If he could still make a mistake and judge inaccurately with such a large level gap between them, that would be the real joke. When he looked at this hateful fellow again, Jun Xie once more felt a deep heartache. His 2 souls had shared the same body and cultivated, complementing each other for several hundred years now. But because of this kid now, this had been ruined. This was the same as crippling half of his cultivation. Perhaps even more than that. Even consuming a heavenly saint-level herb like the Heaven-Earth Spirit Root and absorbing the dense Heaven-Earth Spiritual Qi in the 7-colored Saint Jade had only been enough to save his body. But it was incapable of reviving the slain male's soul. Despite being crippled by half, and using 2 precious, life-saving treasures, it was not enough to recuperate. The hatred in Jun Xie's heart had already reached an extreme level. Little bastard. Just who the hell are you? Jun Xie looked coldly at Jun Moxie and asked. Jun Moxie's body shook, and he struggled to pull himself up. Even more blood poured out of his mouth. This blood was actually from a dead wolf that he had killed along the way and harbored in his mouth. Using the art of unlocking heaven's fortune to change it a little, this blood looked no different than the kind that would be coughed up if his internal organs were injured. This young master is Jun Moxie. Jun Xie, you perverted half-bred pig. A worthless she-male thing like you actually crafted the plot to harm my Xue Yan? You're a bastard who deserves 1,000 deaths. To think that you wouldn't die even with that strike. Heaven has no eyes. Jun Moxie cursed fiercely in a seemingly weak manner. Jun Moxie? Huh. Truly. You can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, and yet by a lucky chance you may find the lost thing without even looking for it. So it turns out that you released the news about going out to look for your master, just to hide around here and play assassin. Jun Xie laughed coldly. As for Venerable Mei, that cheap slut originally deserveth to die. I only made the plans, so it's nothing much. This saint regrets that I was unable to strangle her to death with my own hands. Purposely acting innocent and putting on a pretty form to seduce men, but she's just a beast down to the bones. You piece of shit. You perverted she-male. You're the one who's a bastard. Jun Moxie roared with rage. But with another pu sound. He spat out another large mouthful of blood, practically creating a bloody puddle on the ground before him. after spitting out this mouthful of blood. His body tethered dangerously, as if he was about to fall back down. His breath grew more ragged, and he seemed like a lamp on its last drop of oil. Jun Xie's eyes flashed with cruelty as she walked over slowly. "Don't worry. I will not let you die so easily. From now on, you'll be my toy. I will make sure to have fun with your entire life, making you enjoy a life worse than death. If I don't serve you well, how could I repay you for your great favor towards me? Do you look forward to it? This saint will use all the wondrous herbs and medicine that I've collected over the years on you, leaving you to suffer in a sea of fire, yet unable to die for an eternity. Dream on. This young master will rather die than fall into the hands of a freak like you." Jun Moxie snorted coldly and abruptly sucked in a deep breath. "Perish the thought. You still think that you can sever your heart veins and take your own life in front of me?" Jun Xie mocked coldly. His body flashed, moving at an extreme speed and arriving before Jun Moxie in an instant. A finger pressed forward, quick as lightning, towards Jun Moxie's forehead. As long as this finger landed, it would instantly disrupt the flow of Xian qi in his body. All Xian qi in his body would not be roused, and even if he tried to bite his own tongue, his body would lack the strength. The finger pressed down firmly on Jun Moxie's forehead, and he immediately collapsed weakly to the ground without any strength to resist. Jun Xie snorted coldly as he looked smugly at the unconscious Jun Moxie. "Even if you're as elusive as a ghost, aren't you still going to end up drinking this old lady's feet washing water? Just wait. This old lady will take good care of you really soon." After saying that, he stooped down and searched all over Jun Moxie's body. His brows tightly furrowed. "Oh. Where's the divine weapon that managed to injure me? Could it be that this little bastard threw it away along the way? This brat's really traveling light. There's nothing on him at all." Flipping him around, he grabbed him and held him by the waist before flying up and retracing the path that Jun Moxie had taken, searching all along the way. That sword was capable of injuring a saint-level expert while being wielded by a venerable. It was definitely a peak-level divine weapon. It was quite likely to be an entirely peerless weapon. Even an expert like Jun Xie would not be willing to let such a precious treasure go. As for this little bastard, his Xian cultivation has been completely crippled by me. From now on, I can do anything to him as I wish. Countless thoughts fleeted through his head as he flew along, each one capable of causing a person torment that felt worse than death. "I must use every single one of these punishments on you. Jun Moxie. If I let you die just like that, would I still be the yin yang saint?" Jun Xie muttered sinisterly to himself. In that moment, he thought about how his title of yin yang saint had also been ruined by this little bastard. Right now, he was only the yin saint. There would never be a yang saint in his body anymore. As he thought to that point, his hatred surged upwards again, and he could not wait to teach the brat the most painful lesson. Just at this time, Jun Xie suddenly heard an extremely familiar sentence. Thereafter, he saw an extremely familiar scene. A sentence that nearly caused his soul to scatter in fright, and an absolutely terrifying scene. "Freak. Die." This was the exact sentence that she'd heard not so long ago. A dazzlingly brilliant swordlight flashed once again, like the most radiant sun. The swordlight appeared right under Jun Xie's abdomen, following the exact same path like an enraged dragon, plunging deeply into his body and stabbing through his heart. Then, the same terrifying sword chi once again surged through his body, spreading in all directions with the familiar painful feeling before exploding. Jiang Junji completely froze. In this moment of life and death, he completely froze. The exact same scenario. The exact same posture. The exact same sword light. The exact same rupturing feeling. And the exact same words. And he was also clasping the exact same guy under his arms as he flew through the air. Everything, all the events from not even a quarter of an hour ago had been reenacted again. He turned around slowly. And indeed, he was still facing the exact same handsome youth, standing exactly 10 zhang away as before. It was the same sword-browed, starry-eyed, handsome young man looking like a lush green bamboo standing aloofly in the forest. Only this time, the other party was not running. Not only was he not running, he was staring at him with an extremely frigid gaze as he coldly spat. Half-bred freak. You're finished. This time, you're truly finished. Fresh blood rained from the sky, scattering over the area. This scene was also extremely similar to before. Only this time, Jiang Junji was not able to stop his blood miraculously like the last time. Instead, as his blood flowed freely, and his entire figure also dropped heavily to the ground, landing with a loud plop. Even after landing on the ground, his eyes were still filled with disbelief. In fact, he'd overlooked the heart-rending pain of impending death. Too coincidental. He didn't dare to believe it and was also unable to believe it. The opponent had used the exact same technique, in the space of 15 minutes, deal him 2 completely identical deadly blows. The first attack had destroyed his unique yin-yang body, reaping away half his life. The second attack had directly harvested away his remaining life. Although it was not impossible to recover from the terrifying injury this time, it would require a multitude of precious treasures and a chance to recuperate. By relying on the powerful recovery abilities of saints, it was possible to completely recover after 80 to 100 years of seclusion. But he knew that his opponent would never grant him such an opportunity. He could make the same mistake twice, but his opponent would not. Not even once. And now that he thought back to his 2 mistakes, he realized that if he clashed with Jun Moxie again, he would most likely still fall for it again. This person's research and understanding of the psychology of human nature had simply reached an exceedingly terrifying level. Jun Moxie, you're truly a good schemer. Jiang Junji finally said in a low voice. He was not praising his martial abilities, but his monstrous schemes and wit. Although given Jun Moxie's age, it was also an extremely shocking thing that he could reach such a level of cultivation so quickly. Without the appropriate level of cultivation, even the most elaborate setup would be meaningless. Jiang Junji's defeat this time was mainly because he had been fully subdued by the meticulous plot of his enemy. A second-level venerable successfully killed a saint. And it was a saint expert at peak strength, meticulously setting up a death trap, luring the saint expert to step in, and claiming his life. Jiang Junji even suspected that the blood that Jun Moxie had coughed up earlier was fake. If that was the case, it would mean that a second-level venerable had killed a saint expert at his peak condition, while sustaining no injury or losses. If someone told Jiang Junji about this prior to now, he would probably laugh his ass off. This was simply an impossible matter. It was so ridiculous that it wasn't funny anymore. This was a colossal joke. But right now, in this moment, he had turned into one of the main characters in this colossal joke. And as the main villain who got defeated as well. How sad was that? Jun Moxie laughed cheekily, not answering. His body moved, and the sword in his hand flashed. Jiang Junji howled wretchedly, his voice forlorn and bitter. In that moment, The tendons in his arms and legs had all been cut off by Jun Moxie. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 778. Worse than a beast. With a swing of the sword, fresh blood poured out like a fountain. All right, we can finally have a good chat now. Jun Moxie smiled warmly and said in a gentle tone. If you could move your arms and legs, I would feel somewhat worried. But I can finally relax now. Saint-level experts are known to have unimaginable regenerative abilities. But for an injury of this level, I believe it isn't something that can be recovered in just a short while. I can leave this bit of time for you. Now, let's enjoy ourselves slowly, there's no hurry. Jun Xie felt his entire body turn cold instantly. Even his heart had frozen over in this moment. Even the last bit of chance for him to retaliate and perish with his enemy had been ruthlessly smashed. Although he was on the verge of dying, if he decided to go all out and throw away even his last breath of life, igniting his final wisp of life force, he could still make his enemy suffer dearly. But his enemy's method was actually so cruel and decisive. To think that he would strike so directly, and in such a swift and clean manner, not leaving him with the slightest opportunity to turn the tables. Jun Moxie had only attacked 3 times from the start. The first time, he'd crippled his yin-yang body. The second time, he'd heavily injured Jun Xie, leaving him on his last breath of life. And the third time, he'd sliced off the tendons on his arms and legs, completely removing any possibility of a counterattack. At this moment, Jun Xie could finally be considered to have truly walked to the end of the road. There weren't even a single shred of hope left. Even if the other 5 saint experts appeared right now, Jun Moxie could still kill him first and escape. Even if the rest managed to forcefully rescue him and pull him from death's grasp, he would still be a cripple for the rest of his life. Jun Xie was a saint-level expert, and he could clearly detect that Jun Moxie's sword chi contained an extremely strange trait. Perhaps calling it strange was not exactly accurate, because the chi itself was immense and powerful, like an imposing array of soldiers, neat and ordinary. There was nothing furtive about it, and it was filled with baleful power. This orderly yet destructive power's origins had completely exceeded Jun Xie's saint-level knowledge. He was completely unable to neutralize it, let alone recover from it. Thus, from this moment on, Jun Xie was already destined to be a complete cripple. This odd energy caused him to think of the 9 Nether First Young Master's famed death chi. This matter was actually quite within reason. The energy that he'd unleashed just now was the destruction chi created by the inversion of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. The art of unlocking heaven's fortune was a wondrous technique and was naturally capable of birthing life and creation with endless possibilities. But the opposite of that was pure destruction. Extreme yin births yang, and extreme yang forms yin. The reversal of life was the beginning of death. He displayed this skill once before, on Xiao Han's body. And this time, Jun Xie became the second lucky person to experience the same thing. I heard that you are a very unique transvestite. Other transvestites are either male or female, but you seem to be a man one day, and a woman another day. I'm about to widen my horizons today. Jun Moxie cocked his head and looked at Jun Xie in a funny way. Then, with a swish of his sword, Jun Xie's clothes were instantly torn into shreds, revealing his naked body. Jun Moxie, just kill me directly. Humiliating others like this, they are not the actions of a man. The chilly mountain wind blew around his naked body. And Jun Xie felt so embarrassed that he wanted to die. Although he was a person with low morals and loved engaging in perverted acts, that was only if he was the one in the dominating position. Right now, a powerful saint like him was actually forcefully stripped and displayed in the open. The impact on his pride was truly hard to describe with words. Humiliate you? Of course I want to humiliate you. How simple would it be to take your life? Do you think you're my son? That I would be so interested to play with you and tease you? Jun Moxie only took a single look and instantly turned his head, making a few retching sounds. Adding together all the disgust that he'd been holding in from the start, he vomited his stomach clean and only finally regained his breath after a long time. With a flick of his sword, a piece of cloth flew upwards and covered the disgusting thing. That thing was truly too gross to look at. It was guaranteed to make anyone puke each time they looked at it. I heard that your father is an alien of the strange races? Jun Moxie asked curiously. I heard that the strange races are people with joint bodies, and that they're married to their conjoined siblings. What an abomination! Ah! Jun Moxie mocked coldly and spat with disgust. I originally wanted to curse at your disgusting father. However, he's basically not even considered a person, just an inbred bastard like you. Scolding him is dirtying my mouth. Then, I thought about scolding your mother. But she's actually the most innocent party. Furthermore, after being our *ped by that disgusting thing that's worse than a beast, she gave birth to you. I'll let her off and not scold her on account of my pity for her. Jun Xie's eyes were now completely red, and only some choking sounds came from his mouth. He'd nearly fainted and died from being angered by Jun Moxie's abuse. Seriously, I'm not really sure how I should curse you. All the normal words used to scold and curse at people are not suitable on you. What a headache. Jun Moxie continued in a troubled manner. Because you're a complete half-bred bastard. A mixed *X creature. And a pervert. No matter how I curse at you, it would be like speaking normal words to you. In fact, I might even make you look pure and innocent with those words. Wouldn't that be going too cheaply on you? Jun Xie suddenly laughed in a bitter manner. Jun Moxie, didn't you say you wanted to curse at that donghua father of mine? Go ahead and cuss him out. Scold as loudly as you want. Let me tell you, this daddy wants to scold that bastard more badly than you. That inbred old transvestite deserves to have no descendants. For the first time, Jun Moxie was stumped. He'd never thought that this fellow would actually scold his own father in a much more toxic and fluent manner than even him. This was a truly unexpected development. This fellow was truly worse than a beast. My father. Hey! Is he worthy of that? Jun Xie turned and spat ruthlessly. He's nothing but a perverted animal. Fecking bastard. He was already facing certain death. But he still wanted to go and create me, leaving me to suffer my fill of pain alone in this world. When I was 7, I was alone in the mountains, and abused by a wolf. When I was 8, I was taken into the wolf's den. On the days I thought I was a female, I was naturally not let off. But when I turned into a man, they also. Just thinking of this makes me want to fecking go and dig up his grave. Jun Moxie was completely speechless. To think that this fellow's childhood was so tragic. Indeed, perverted people had all been handled in a perverse manner in the past. This was simply too domineering. Scold then. Why aren't you scolding him? That old half-bred beast. Aged scoundrel. Perverted relic. Jun Xie cursed with ragged breath, finally smiling happily. Satisfying. It's enough for me to just watch you do the scolding. Your words are much more vicious than mine. Jun Moxie admitted his inferiority. Despite having lived through 2 lives, this was the first time he'd ever seen someone like Jun Xie scold his own father so righteously and so venomously. Jun Xie was undoubtedly a pervert among all perverts, a scum among all scums, and a wretched individual among all wretched individuals. An existence that was queerer than the most deranged transvestites. Truly, he was the leading figure among even the most select half-bred creatures that walked the land. Compared to this, his plot to harm Mei Xue Yan could only be considered a small matter. It was even somewhat insignificant. For a scum like this, were there any deeds too evil for him to commit? At best, a small plot like this was only a modest display of his true abilities. Over the other side of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, there is definitely green smoke rising out of your family's tomb right now. If one's descendants bring glory to the family, azure smoke rises from their ancestors' tombs. If they commit evil deeds that even the heavens disdain, black smoke rises from the tombs. But yours is actually green. Jun Moxie sighed and shook his head. Your ancestors, forget it. I'm not in the mood to continue scolding. This is disgusting enough. I'll just send you on your way then. Just by looking at you, I already lost all my mood. Jun Xie laughed loudly in response. So you're speechless now, right? Jun Moxie. Ha ha ha. Send me on my way. Kiki. This old man has one request to beg of you. Without waiting for Jun Moxie to answer, he spat venomously. I hate this body of mine to the extreme. I only ask that you can be more vicious when you kill me. Split my body into 2 and chop it up into minced meat. I want that cursed half-breed bloodline of mine to completely flow out of my body. When I reach the depths of hell, I'll look for that old bastard to settle the scores. Jun Xie laughed viciously, as if he were saying, I want him to be left with no descendants. Oh no. I'm a really kind person. How could I do something so cruel? I've specially prepared an extremely comfortable way for you to die. Jun Xie. You should enjoy it slowly. After all, this is the long-lost tenderness that you've been missing. Jun Moxie looked expressionlessly at him as he took out a bottle of fluid and slowly poured it over his body. In an instant, a strange smell rose from his body, spreading far and wide. Within a short moment, the howls of wolves rang out from the distance. Jun Moxie stood up and took out another bottle filled with greenish-black fluid, detonating it in the air. With a wave of his sleeves, the contents of the fluid spreaded over 100 zhang area. The entire area was filled with an odd aura. Then, as he retreated, the hilt of his sword smashed against Jun Xie's dantian. A light pop rang out and all his remaining xian qi was thoroughly dissipated. From now, although Jun Xie still had his saint-level xian qi in his body, he would not be able to do anything with it. He couldn't project it out and could not even use it to protect his body. The only use it had was to nourish his body, healing all the wounds so they could heal. So he wouldn't die swiftly. Soon, a greenish-black wild wolf appeared in the distance, charging over with an excited look in its eyes. Jun Xie screamed in terror, Jun Moxie. What are you doing? Hurry up and kill me. Kill me now. He instantly recognized what that smell was, but because he was able to recognize it, and it caused him to be even more terrified, horrifying him to the extreme. That was the mating aura of wild wolves in springtime. And right now was the time when winter had just passed, which meant that it was the beginning of spring. Jun Moxie's figure disappeared slowly into the distance. Enjoy it well, Jun Xie. You may relive the precious memories of your childhood here, letting them accompany you on the last part of your journey. Oh, with your saint-level cultivation, you'll have a much stronger regenerative power than normal people, so you should be able to linger in your nostalgic memories for a longer time. Have fun. Numerous loud howls rang out, and 7, 8 wild wolves the size of small cows ran out of the forest. Each one's eyes were blazing with excited azure light as they sniffed at the aura which excited them to no end. All of them bounded towards the helpless Jun Xie. The prey lying before them was not only a sumptuous feast, but also the most tempting object in the world. The number one temptation under the heavens. Jun Xie screamed wretchedly once, and his voice was quickly scattered among the heavy panting of the wolves. After many hours, Jun Moxie finally returned. By now, only a pile of bones remained on the ground. You've probably been satisfied, right? I'll take it as letting you off lightly to let you feel such comfort before dying. Jun Moxie turned and left in the southeast direction. With the first step he took out, he grounded that pile of bones into dust. In the southeast direction, there were 5 more saints. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 779. Ungrateful and Treacherous. The sky slowly darkened, turning day into night. The boundless darkness was about to shroud the entire land. Qi Tianfeng walked into a neighboring town and found an inn, where he proceeded to boil a pot of tea in a leisurely manner. There, he sat for a good half a day and listened to some stories until the sun was almost gone. Finally, he stood up slowly, placed some silver on the table, and left. With the setting sun before him, Qi Tianfeng's figure casted a long shadow behind him. He looked somewhat sullen and lonely. A moment later, he found a carriage and bought quite a large amount of wine and delicious food, filling the carriage with them. There were nearly 20 jars of wine, and each one was 50 jin heavy. He climbed onto the carriage and slowly pulled out of the town, journeying toward the south. Normally, when one reached the Saint realm, they would not care much about eating or drinking anymore. In fact, it was completely normal even if they didn't eat for 10 days or half a month. Once they entered secluded cultivation, it wasn't rare to not eat or drink anything for months. Whether there was food to eat or anything to drink was already not a concern in their lives anymore. But today, Qi Tianfeng's suggestion of a feast was quite unexpectedly met with the agreement of the rest of the saints. Even Qi Tianfeng, who proposed the idea, was somewhat shocked at the response. It turned out that he was not the only one who did not think favorably of their chances in a fight against Jun Moxie's master. The others also thought the same way. Therefore this time, Qi Tianfeng had bought several times more food and drink. Since everyone decided to get drunk, then they should get thoroughly drunk. Who would have thought that they would lose 3 saints from the illusory blood sea just by trying to deal with a mere 4th-level venerable Mei Xue Yan, causing their total strength to fall by a third? Even if it was because of the appearance of the shocking Saint King pills, this result was still too exaggerated. Later on, if they went up against Jun Moxie's mysterious master, what kind of price would they have to pay? That was a matter that no one could predict with confidence. But there was one point that was hammered clearly into their heads from that fight with Mei Xue Yan. Saints were not invincible existences to those experts below the saint level. Saints could also die. Right now, they still had 6 people on their side. Wanting to eliminate that grand expert without suffering a single casualty was undoubtedly a pipe dream. It was a completely impossible matter. Even if the 6 of them surrounded and attacked a saint of the same rank, there would still be casualties. Not to mention that mysterious expert was very possibly many times stronger than them. Qi Tianfeng traveled absent-mindedly all the way until he reached the place where he had parted with Jun Xie. Although he loathed to see that fellow, they had agreed on the meeting earlier. But after waiting for some time, the weirdo still had not turned up. Qi Tianfeng did not put the matter to heart, thinking that fellow must have gone somewhere. Without waiting any further, he turned the carriage around and returned to the cave. When they reached the foot of the mountain, he paid the carriage driver a piece of gold, and under the shocked eyes of the carriage driver, he stretched out his hand and all the goods in the carriage seemed to be grabbed by a gigantic palm, stacking up to 40, 50 zhang high. The more than 1,000 jin worth of wine and food were directly hoisted away, and Qi Tianfeng skipped up the mountain like that, without so much as turning his head back. The carriage driver was so frightened that his stomach was twisted and cramped. The word demon came to his mouth, but he didn't dare to shout it out. His hands and legs trembling fiercely, he climbed onto the carriage and whipped the horse in an urgent manner. His face was pale and his lips were green, as if he'd seen a ghost. Without any hesitation, he rushed back with a speed so great, it was as if a family member had died. The journey that normally would take 6 to 8 hours to travel was actually completed in just 2 hours. Of course, the poor carriage was rattled so hard that most of its part was already torn away from the frame. Even after he stepped into his house, he was still engrossed in a nightmarish state. His hands were cold and clammy, and when he opened his tightly balled fist, the dazzling gold ingot still laid within. As if not daring to believe that it was real, he brought the gold to his mouth and bit down on it. His tooth grew numb, and the gold still remained solid. From the looks of it, this gold ingot was real. But because of it, he became even more frightened. The poor carriage driver even fell sick because of this incident. Seeing Qi Tianfeng returning by himself and carrying much stuff with him, Chen Chong and the rest could not help but be slightly stunned. "Where's Jun Xie?" Chen Chong asked with furrowed brows. How come that fellow didn't come back with Qi Tianfeng this time? That was a little strange. On the other hand, he was also taking the chance to have a little laugh at Qi Tianfeng. The feeling of being together with Jun Xie was truly quite unforgettable. Qi Tianfeng nearly tripped and dropped the wine jars. Shaking his head with a lingering fear in his heart, he hurriedly said, "Boss Chen, I beseech you, please don't mention that fellow in front of me anymore. I really had enough of him today." Ha ha ha. The others all laughed in a gloating manner. Just thinking of it also gave them slight goosebumps. Who cares? Every time that fellow goes out, he'd engage in things offensive to God and reason. Who knows where she ran off to this time, committing some unthinkable acts. Boss Chen, since Jun Xie isn't here, the 5 of us brothers can have a good drink. When that fellow comes back, the rest of us would only feel more uncomfortable. Cui Chang, he laughed happily. Exactly. It seems like Jun Xie still has some sensibility to leave us alone this time. Sa Qing Lu laughed aloud as he grabbed the stuff from Qi Tianfeng and moved them into the cave. Qi Tianfeng's hands were finally freed. Wiping away the cold sweat that had formed on his forehead from the mention of Jun Xie, he smiled bitterly. "Brother Chen, now I finally know how difficult it is to live in your elusive world of immortals." Although these words sounded strange, they were definitely Qi Tianfeng's heartfelt words. They were his honest feelings. He had only interacted with Jun Xie for half a day, and he'd already been brought to the edge of a mental collapse. What more several hundred years? With Qi Tianfeng's words, Sa Qinglu and Cui Cheng, he suddenly looked at Chen Chong with more impressed expressions. Those are strong-willed men. Ah, to be able to endure that weirdo for several hundred years. Chen Chong smiled helplessly and shrugged his shoulders. To be honest, all of us cultivate separately. If there's nothing important, even if dozens of years go by, it would be difficult to see each other even once. The other saint who hadn't spoke until now looked coldly at everyone and pursed his mouth. I've never seen that fellow before. If not for this outing, I wouldn't even know of his existence. Chen Chong rolled his eyes with exasperation. You've never even been out of that cultivation cave of yours. Is there anything you've ever seen? This frosty-looking saint was exactly like his name, Leng Tong, meaning cold eyes. He was also known as the demon pupil saint. As they spoke, Cui Cheng he had already finished laying out the food and wine. Using his bare hands, he cut out 5 stone bowls from the cave walls. The thickness of the bowls were perfect for holding and drinking wine. The 5's faces were wreathed in smiles as they sat together. After 3 rounds of wine, the smile on the faces of everyone slowly grew less wide, and their complexion grew heavier. Originally, each person would crack a few jokes, but the more they drank, the heavier the atmosphere became. Drinking was normally something that would start off reservedly, and grow more lively as time went on. But for these 5 people, it was completely the opposite. After a long time, Sa Qinglu sighed deeply and put down the bowl in his hand. This wine today, the more I drink it, the more tasteless it's becoming. Leng Tong snorted coldly and rolled his eyes. To be honest, we should not even be out here this time. Us saints have hundreds of years of cultivation behind us, and all of it is simply to duke it out with the strange races Frenzy Blade enduring Ghost and Frenzy Blade enduring Earth. Since when were us saints being sent out for such nonsensical matters like this? Chen Chong shook his head helplessly. This matter is also because there's no choice. Leng Tong snorted coldly again, in an even more annoyed tone. What do you mean by no choice? No choice my ass. This is simply a case of Mo Wu Dao wanting to exact revenge for his own brother. He's satisfying private ends by utilizing public means. This kind of action truly causes one's heart to lose all respect. When did us saints of the 3 holy lands turn into tools for other people's vengeance? Chen Chong laughed bitterly and shook his head. Leng Tong, say less words. Everyone is drinking just fine. What's the point of saying these dampening words? Everyone, let's continue drinking. Leng Tong's eyes trembled, and he slammed the stone bowl in his hand down, shattering it into pieces. Still drink what? Fart. How am I being a spoilsport? Am I not just speaking the truth? Why? That fellow can do this, but I can't even speak about it. Who would have thought that the 2 elusive world of immortal saints would suddenly start arguing with each other? Qi Tianfeng and the rest could not help but look at each other awkwardly. Chen Chong laughed dryly in response. Old brother Leng has been immersed in secluded cultivation within the Holy Land for a long time and hasn't been much in touch with the affairs of the world. So his character is more straightforward and brash. Leng Tong rolled his eyes and snorted unhappily. You don't have to try and cover for me. I've always been direct with my words. How do I not understand the ways of the world? With a stretch of his hand, a large piece of rock was removed from the cave. With a casual swipe, the rock was hollowed out and smoothed into a huge bowl. Lifting up the wine jar, he poured himself a full bowl and gulped it down in one go. Just to handle a mere 4th-level venerable, 9 saints were actually been sent out this time. In addition, 3 saints from the illusory blood sea lost their lives. His eyes grew red. And he raised his voice. That's 3 Saint Realm experts. What impact will that have on the war for seizing the heavens? How many saints are there in the entirety of the 3 holy lands? Do you all really not know? If all the saint experts died, could it be that we would need to send saint kings to deal with the likes of Frenzy Blade Enduring Ghost and Frenzy Blade Enduring Earth? If that's the case, who will go to deal with Supremacy Enduring Heavens when he appears? The other 4 fell silent, unable to reply. Together, they lifted up their wine bowls and drank deeply. There's still more. Those youngsters beneath us are performing all manners of evil as they please, running amok without care and dealing with TNFA. Mother-fecking hell. I simply don't understand. Leng Tong downed 3 large bowls of wine without pause and wiped his mouth, continuing. What's the deal with TNFA? What's wrong with them? What wrongs have they committed? What wrongs has Venerable Mei done? Why do they have to pick on her? What rights do they have to pick on her? His ice-cold eyes suddenly turned hot and fiery, as he swept his eyes across everyone. You're drunk. A hint of anger appeared on Chen Chang's face. I'm not drunk. I'm not drunk at all. Leng Tong roared with rage. It's been 10.000 years. For the past 10.000 years, the ferocious land of TNFA has been an important factor in every single war for seizing the heavens. TNFA is the same as us. They've guarded this land for an entire 10.000 years. Not to mention that they haven't done anything wrong. And even if they have, with the great contributions they have made, isn't it enough to cover over any mistakes? Sa Qing Lu snorted coldly. Brother Leng, TNFA's wrongs lay in the fact that, even if their contributions are greater, they're just a bunch of wild beasts in the end. Animals. Do you understand now? Hearing this, Leng Tong laughed loudly in a crazy manner. Bullshit. Complete bullshit. How come nobody complained about them being wild beasts and animals in the previous war for seizing the heavens? When the 3 holy lands were weak and powerless during the war for seizing the heavens and had to rely entirely on TNFA to control the situation. How come no one minded that they were just some wild animals? When we honor all those seniors whose bones are buried atop the pillar of Heaven's mountain and offer incense to them, why didn't anyone call those seniors wild beasts? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 780. History cannot be changed, but history books can. At the end of the day, you all are basically just being ungrateful. Leng Tong smiled bitterly. No, not you all. It's we all. Can it be that I can escape this sin as well? All of us are simply ungrateful people. What royal excuses are we looking for to justify ourselves? Anything we say would just make the blood of others run cold. Leng Tong laughed coldly and continued in a strange voice. 3 Saint Realm experts of the illusory blood sea ganged up together to bully a 4th-level Venerable Junior. But not only were they unable to win, they were all killed instead. Boss Chen, don't you find this extremely laughable? If the rumors were true, that Venerable Mei is only seriously injured and not dead, tell me, does the 3 Holy Lands still have the face to wind this matter up? Just the humiliation is enough to shame us to death. The moment these words came out, everyone's faces became exceptionally ugly. Qi Tianfeng forced a smile onto his face and shook his head. Brother Leng, you might be aware of this, but the thing that Venerable Mei used was the Saint King pills left behind by the first Saint King of TNFA. It allows the user's strength to improve explosively by at least 10 times or more. At that time, we saw ourselves that she'd consumed 3 of those pills together, allowing her to burst forth with such terrifying strength. In addition, there was the lightning tribulation which worked to her advantage, resulting in such an ending. After this, there definitely won't be another case of someone capable of transcending realms and obtaining victory like that. Venerable Mei is the only one who managed to defy all logic and achieve such an unbelievable feat. You rarely stain your feet in the affairs of the mortal world and put all your heart into cultivation steadfastly. This is something that I've always admired greatly about you. However, times have changed. What kind of strength has our 3 holy lands reached now? Could it be that we still need to continue relying on some Xian beasts that doesn't know anything to protect us? Humans are the rightful rulers of the world since the beginning, the wisest of all creatures. But if we need animals to protect us every time, how could this be endured? I naturally understand your point, and I can empathize with it. As a human myself, I, Leng Tong, have my pride as well. I, too, am unwilling to rely on anyone not from the human race to fight against the strange races. But even if we no longer require Tian Fa's strength, do we really need to force them into a corner and wipe them out? Have you all forgotten about how Tian Fa sacrificed to secure the safety of the continent all these years? Now that we've grown stronger, are we going to kick them aside? Leng Tong continued huffily. Not using their strength in the war for seizing the heavens is one matter, but declaring war against them is another matter entirely. Could it be that just because we don't want them to participate in the next war for seizing the heavens that we must annihilate them completely? As humans, we naturally have our pride. But there's another point that all of you, my saint brothers, need to know. The most precious thing about being a human is that compared to beasts, we possess something called a conscience. Right now, we're personally moving to slay the comrades who've shown us great kindness and helped us greatly for more than 10,000 years. Haha, dare I ask everyone, can we still be called humans? We don't want to do this either. But those wild beasts of Tian Fa are just too simple-minded. Even if they know that we don't need them anymore, they would still rush to the pillar of heaven's mountains. Even if we heap burning satire and freezing irony upon them, those dumb Xian beasts would still think that we're praising them. Chen Chong said in a depressed tone. I'll give you an example. It's said that 1.500 years ago, our 3 holy lands were at an unprecedented peak, not inferior to our current level. That year, we no longer needed Tian Fa's help. The palace lord at the time went and told the Tian Fa Saint King, we have full confidence in winning this fight by ourselves this time. As the saying goes, there's no need to use an ox cleaver to kill a chicken. Lord Saint King is a lofty figure, so there's no need for you to dirty your hands in this fight. Why don't you bring your army and return? We will never forget the kindness and help you've rendered to us these past 10,000 years. Those words had already clearly conveyed their intentions to exclude Tian Fa from participating in the war for seizing the heavens. But the Saint King of Tian Fa actually replied, don't worry about it. We can talk about kindness and all that stuff after the battle. This time, we shall kill the strange races until their blood flows like a river. Isn't it more enjoyable to use an ox cleaver to kill chickens? Us Xian beasts also know your funny idioms now. Qi Tianfeng and the rest could not stop themselves from laughing aloud in mockery. Undoubtedly, all of them were laughing at the Tian Fa Saint King who thought himself to be very clever. Chen Chong had intended to use this incident as a joke, to lighten the atmosphere. But unexpectedly, Leng Tong's expression became even more unsightly. The Xian beasts' simple-mindedness and honesty are their most precious qualities. Is it something very funny? Pausing for a moment, he continued. It's precisely because they're simple and honest, never scheming against others, that we had been able to trust them with any tasks without worry. If we gave them our backs and asked them to protect us, there would be nothing to be scared about. Can humans do that? The three holy lands can trust Tianfa with our backs without question. But which one of the holy lands would dare to trust the other two holy lands with their backs? How difficult is it to find such honest and reliable comrades? But you all actually took them to be fools to toy with. Just for this kind of laughable reason. You wanted to annihilate all the Xian beasts. Chen Chang's face stiffened, and he turned angry. Leng Tong, do you know what you are saying? Remember which side you're standing on. You're a human. Could it be that you think it's an extremely glorious thing to live in the protection and kindness of a bunch of wild animals for 10,000 years? Now that we have this kind of rare chance, why can't we make use of it to wipe away our shameful history? Wipe this shameful history away. You actually think that that period of history was shameful? Leng Tong looked at him with shock. Boss Chen, no matter whether you think it to be shameful or not, this is still history that has already transpired. It is the unchangeable truth. So how will you wipe it away? Even if our three holy lands killed all the Tianfa beast kings and wiped out every last Xian beast, hunting them to extinction, would it be able to change what happened in the past? History cannot be changed. However, the history books can be rewritten. Chen Chong stared back at him with a stormy expression. Leng Tong, do you really want this old man to say everything so clearly? Leng Tong was left completely speechless. This sentence that Chen Chong spoke was completely shameless and so insidious that it shocked him completely. He only managed to react after a few seconds. His pale face turned red with anger in an instant, and his eyes were bloodshot as he raised his voice. Despicable. Shameless. Utterly shameless. So this was the scheme you were hatching. To actually, try to rewrite history. This is disregarding and dishonoring our ancestors. This is the act of wretches and bastards. You all, are all of you agreeing to this? Nonsense. What disregarding and dishonoring our ancestors? What we're doing is wiping away the shame of our predecessors. Since the beginning of time, the winners are king, while the losers are the villains. This is the undying truth. Did you think that all the history you've read until now is real? Let me tell you, history is simply a collection of historical records. And where do you think all those historical records came from? Aren't they all written by people? And who do you think those people are? They were naturally written by the hands of the victorious. Do you understand now? Chen Chong flew into a rage and his eyes grew wider. The historical books we have seen from the beginning of the dynasties, the history that we are familiar with, are actually the memory of the people of the victorious. As for all the good and evil characters inside our so-called historical records, the majority of them are fake. Imaginary. They are wishful thinking. Do you understand? As long as we successfully destroy Tianfa, the so-called history will be whatever we write it to be. If we don't want Tianfa to exist in history, then there won't be the words Tianfa in the history of this continent. If we want someone to disappear from the annals of history, that person will not have existed. We can even turn the so-called ferocious land of Tianfa into a poisonous tumor that spread great harm in the continent traders who betrayed humans to the strange races. As long as we are the final victors. From that point on, whether it is 100 years later, or 1,000 years later, the later generations will only know the version of history that we passed down. all of them will naively take it to be the truth. Do you understand now? I'm telling you right now. The history books have never told of the true history. Never. Towards the end, Chen Chong was practically shouting. But won't you feel the least bit guilty about that? Don't you think that this is an act that's utterly devoid of conscience? You did not think about those heroes that contributed all their efforts for 10,000 years for the sake of this continent. Can you really feel at peace like that? Leng Tong did not yield a single inch. His right hand twitched, and the big stone bowl in his hand was crushed again. Conscience? What conscience? Chen Chong sneered. Only the winners have the right to talk about conscience. When our version of history is accepted by all throughout the future generations, you will find that this so-called conscience is actually the most insignificant thing, unworthy of being mentioned. He laughed coldly and continued. You really naively thought that we only started planning to deal with Tian Fa now? Why was Tian Fa's predecessor Saint King sealed inside the misty illusory manor's beguiling mist? Did you really think that the 3 Saint Emperors and 16 Saint Kings of the misty illusionary manor all failed at the same time? Are you really that naive? I'll tell you honestly. If not for Tian Fa Forest being too difficult to attack, it would have already been turned into our 3 Holy Lands Mount training camp. Why did we attack only Venerable Mei? Why didn't we kill the other beast kings? Why? Why? When will this blockhead of yours get enlightened? So it turns out that this plan to deal with Tian Fa was premeditated so long ago. Leng Tong stood up speechlessly. His rage turned into sorrow, and then into powerlessness and hopelessness. His shoulders dropped and he sighed sadly. If this is what it means, to be enlightened, then I, Leng Tong, hope that I will not be enlightened for the rest of this life. This world is disgusting. So this so-called beautiful world is actually filled with such ugliness. Even the lofty 3 holy lands are the same. I really thought that we were heroes of the war for seizing the heavens, and we hadn't let down the word heroes, Kakik. Looks like I was wrong. And very ridiculously wrong too. Leng Tong said with disappointment. His countenance was suddenly filled with loneliness and sorrow. Disgusting. Repressed. It doesn't matter. Whether it be beauty or ugliness, this is the true face of life. And it is even more so the life of those who make history. Chen Chong continued emotionlessly. So, put away that chivalrous attitude of one who bemoans the state of the universe and pity of mankind. In this world, you only need to do 2 things. First, live on. Second, win. As for the other stuff, it's best to not think about them. As for being a hero, heh heh heh. Chen Chong chuckled coldly a few times, and his tone turned cold. Leng Tong, do you know how heroes are made? Let me tell you. As long as us 3 holy lands wish it, we can turn even a pervert or a hooligan into a hero. How? First, exaggerate. Second, exaggerate. And third, exaggerate more. If one person blows their own horn, it would be nothing but nonsense. But if 100 people do it, it is building credibility. If 10,000 people or 100,000 people proclaim that a person was a hero, that person is a hero. He is a grand hero. Do you understand? Even if that person was only equal to a pile of dog shit, as long as enough people praise him, he would be able to sit on the throne of a hero forever. This story will be continued to chapter 781. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.